Hi, welcome everybody. So wonderful to see so many of your lovely faces here at Sherwood. I just want to also take this time to thank Emma and Jen for organising this amazing event and bringing so many of you here. Sherwood is often known for its events and for its amazing food, but we do have a really cute little studio upstairs, and you will see a timetable on your seats underneath your bottoms. So feel free to come and check it out. We also have a lot of free events happening at the moment, so be sure to check out our Facebook page as well. Keep a regular eye on that. So I'm going to start with talking to you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So at the age of 22, I was a newly married woman, expecting my first child, and had my first mortgage. Life was actually going pretty well. I actually felt pretty comfortable, pretty grounded, and pretty calm with this, even though I was about to step into the unknown at a young age. Now I look back and I realise that the reason why I felt grounded and prepared for this is because at the time I was practising yoga 3 or 4 times a week and practising meditation every day for an hour. This was in a time when mindfulness wasn't even a term that was coined, let alone had become mainstream. So after we had our beautiful daughter, and things were lovely, I stepped into motherhood relatively easily, really enjoyed it. But those of you who are mothers in the audience will know that you end up not having so much time for yourself. So after Danny was born, my hour-long meditation practice every day got shorter and shorter until it no longer existed. My regular 3 or 4 yoga classes a week became pretty minimal, maybe once a month or every, sort of couple of weeks I could get to a class, Yeah, I can hear some of you guys laughing. You're like, yeah, I know that one. And that coupled with sleep deprivation and the financial pressure of, we were living on a single income. Matt was the sole breadwinner. I started to feel a little bit lost. I started to feel a bit of a, loss of identity. I felt a bit overwhelmed. I felt a bit depressed. And, of course, my body started to speak to me. I ended up with eczema all over my face, particularly the lower half, and it wasn't just kind of like, that red rashy eczema. It was like a complete scab. Like, I'm not kidding you, like a scab all around here. It hurt to eat, it hurt to talk, it hurt to laugh, it hurt to smile. Yeah, I really wanted to hide away and not be seen in the world. So it led me to start looking for it. It was like, oh God, I just want to get rid of this. I tried different creams, I tried cutting things out of my diet, I tried many different herbs. I tried lots of things. I was looking outside of myself for all the answers. I was just at the stage, just please, just tell me what to do. Somebody out there, tell me what to do to make this go away, because it's just so horrible. And then things began to change, because that's the only consistent thing we can count on in life, right, is change. So we ended up moving to New Plymouth. We were living in Auckland at the time, and then we moved to New Plymouth, where we lived for 12 years. And I slowly began to get back into my yoga and back into my meditation, and you can probably guess what happened, right? My eczema just cleared up. It just went away. No more creams, no more diets, nothing. It was just this, as I reconnected to myself and used these tools of yoga and meditation, my body began to heal itself. So this inspired me to do my teacher training. I've now been teaching for 17 years and practicing yoga for 20 years. And it's still, after all this time, it still really fascinates me. I'm like, how does yoga work? How come it's so healing? And how come it's so transformational in so many people's lives? Who here practices yoga? That light is so hard to see the audience, right? Hands up high. Oh, yeah, okay. A good amount. That's a good amount. Good. So contrary to popular belief, Yoga is not just about Lululemon tights, tight butts, and green smoothies. I know we could think it's about that, but it's actually not. And hey, I've got nothing against Lululemon. In fact, I'm an ambassador for Lululemon. And I think their products are amazing, truly amazing. But yoga is more than that. Yoga is actually a holistic practice for mind, body, heart, and soul. There is actually 8 limbs to yoga that specifically work on these different aspects of self. They don't just work on the physical body. It doesn't just work on the mental body. It actually works on all of these aspects of self, gives us tools to work on all these different aspects of self so that we can become more whole, more holistic in our wellness, that we can feel more centered, more grounded, and importantly, more connected to our own selves. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about what these 8 limbs are. So the first limb of yoga is yamas, or universal moral guidelines. So yes, before the splits, before the downward dogs, there is moral guidelines. And there's 5 aspects to these moral guidelines. The first one is compassion. Interesting enough, the first one at the top of this is compassion. Then there's truthfulness, not lying, but also not lying, but also being truthful to who we are, listening to our own truth and following with that. Not stealing, not taking too much, and we can look, obviously we know that not stealing is good, but we can think about it on different levels, like, not taking too much from the earth as well. Taking too much is a form of stealing. Investing your energy wisely, like who we choose to spend our time with, what we choose to do with our energy, how we moderate that. And then the last one is non-attachment. I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into this aspect of compassion. If we look at the West today, never before has there been so much material wealth, but there is an epidemic of loneliness, depression, and anxiety. Why do so many of us in the West, who have so much of our basic needs met, feel so lonely and so impoverished? While some politicians might answer, it's the economy, stupid. Based on scientific evidence, a better answer is it's the lack of compassion, actually. The latest research shows that compassion or warm-heartedness really reduces your blood pressure, your anxiety, your stress, and improves your health. What exactly is compassion? Compassion is the recognition of another's suffering and a desire to alleviate that suffering. Often brushed off as a hippy-dippy religious term, irrelevant in modern society, rigorous empirical data supports the view of all world major religions that compassion is good. Not only good in the world, but good for our own health and well-being. So the next limb of yoga is the niyamas, cultivating soul qualities. Yeah, so that's a whole limb, is that we learn to cultivate our soul. Something that's not so often talked about these days, right? So again, there's 5 aspects to these soul qualities. They're purity, this idea that, everything in moderation, a good diet, a healthy diet. Contentment, practicing contentment, being content with what we have, that where we are right here, right now, is enough. Internal flame or enthusiasm or a passion for life. Like that's a practice to feel passionate about the life that we live. And if we're not, then maybe we need to think about how we're going to do things differently and readdress them. Self-study or reflection, this ability to be able to look into ourselves, to be able to check in before we speak and say something that perhaps later we will regret. And celebration of the spiritual. So again, I'm going to just dive into one of those aspects, and this celebration of the spiritual. I mean, I think that's an interesting one. I know it's not that much of a popular term these days, this idea of having faith, trust in God or the spiritual. But again, the latest scientific scientific evidence shows us that when we have faith and trust in something higher than ourselves, it reduces our blood pressure, it increases our immune system, it just generally helps our health and well-being. The third limb, which is the most common, and this is what most of us think that yoga is about, is asana, or physical practice. It's the postures, it's the shapes that you see in the yoga journal magazines, or, you know, if you walk into Lululemon, you'll see them up on the wall in there. And that's often what we think yoga is actually about. But it is only one limb. It's only one limb of yoga. And it's a great limb, right? You know, it's really great for building strength and flexibility, for keeping our body fit and flexible. But, you know, it can also be any kind of physical movement that we really enjoy. So my personal favorite is ecstatic dance. And after that, it's actually walking in nature. You know, so we could think of asana as anything, any physical, mindful physical movement that really brings us joy. And that's important, that it brings us joy, because otherwise exercise can have a bit of a detrimental effect. If it's, you know, if it's done like in a real grinding way, if it's done in a really like, oh, I don't really want to do this, I'll go for my run, it actually does have a detrimental effect on our body. The next limb of yoga is pranayama. This is the limb of working with energy and breath. So I'm not going to go too much into this because you've heard a lot about the importance of breath tonight, and I think you guys are getting that breath is actually a really important part of our health and well-being. I just want to say that, you know, the ancient sages, they knew that breath helped us not only physically but mentally, emotionally and spiritually as well, and that's why it's an important limb in yoga, an important part of yoga, and it's part of the reason why if you go into any yoga class, they'll be focusing, that'll be one of the focuses, is the breath. The next limb, which is a little bit less well known, is called pratyahara. Actually, I'm going to pause there. So that's the first 4 limbs. Like I said, there's 8. The last 4 limbs are all based around mindfulness practices. So the last 4 limbs of yoga all work on how do we focus this mind. I'm not going to go into massive detail because the lovely Tonya who's going to talk after me will be talking more about this, but I'm just going to touch on them briefly. So the 5th limb is pratyahara, which is the turning inward of the senses. So when we live, you know, we live in this really busy world and we have phones going off in the middle of talks. We have social media, we have, you know, all of this pull outside of ourselves, right? You know, constantly like this pull to be outside of ourselves, our senses are outside. So this idea with pratyahara is that we begin to draw our senses inward a little bit more. You know, just softening our gaze, drawing our attention inward to really notice what is happening in here. Because in our busy life, in our, you know, in our going, in our pushing, and our achieving, we actually flick off that switch, and sometimes we're really disconnected to what is actually happening. What am I feeling in my body physically? What am I feeling mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? What does my soul actually hunger for? Do I even know that question? Do I know the answer to that? The next limb is dharana, which is one-pointed concentration, which simply means paying attention on purpose in a particular way. And if you do that for long enough, for longer than 30 seconds, if anyone's ever tried to meditate, it sounds ridiculous. I'm sure I can focus for 30 seconds, but actually it's more challenging than what we think. So dharana, one point in concentration, if we learn to do it for 5 or 10 minutes or for longer, then it turns into dharana or meditation. That's simply what meditation is just being able to hold our awareness on something for longer, you know, for a reasonable amount of time. The last limb is samadhi, which classically is translated as bliss, as this true nature of self. What I like to translate it to is this ability to be able to connect in with ourselves, this ability to be able to find that peace, that calm, that connection inward to ourselves at any time. no matter what's happening in our life. No matter what's happening in our life. Yeah, I know that can seem a bit radical, like when we've got shit happening in our life. But you can actually use these tools to still feel connected, peaceful, calm, and trusting, even when the shit's going down. So, this is all very well, right? You know, it's like, okay, I've got all that knowledge, but until we actually experience it, and those of you who, you know, haven't done yoga wouldn't have experienced this. So I'm going to take you through a little exercise. So an invitation for you all to stand up. Oh, that's better. I can see you all now. You're going to have to put wine glasses down. All right, so we're going to do a really simple exercise. So just bring the back of your wrists together like this, and we're just going to do some wrist circles. So, you know, this is a good exercise. We're just warming up the wrists, and then just go back the other way. Just notice what that feels like. We're juicing up the synovial fluid, juicing up the joints. Yeah, we can feel that feels quite good. Just take a moment and just pause. Now we're going to add a little bit of breath work to it, a little bit of pranayama. So from here, back of the palms together, I invitation just to close your eyes. So just to close your eyes. So that's, remember I talked about withdrawing of the senses. So we now have brought our senses from out there, which your senses are more on me at the moment, to into you. So just take a moment. Can you have as much as your senses inside of you, noticing what your hands feel like, your breath, as much as you do on my voice. Now begin your wrist circles again, if you haven't already, and add a little bit of breath. Become conscious of your breath, of your inhale, of your exhale. So to the movement, to the asana, we could call this an asana. We've added withdrawal of senses. We've added pranayama, a little bit of breath. And we've become a little bit more mindful, right? When we have as much, you can just pause for a moment, when we have as much awareness on the internal space as the external space, we become more mindful. Now just pausing here, we're going to add in one more layer. I want you to bring into your mind somebody that you deeply love and care about, somebody that you know needs some love at the moment. And so breathing that in and breathing some love and some compassion to them, and keep that in your mind as you then again do some wrist circles. Beautiful. And pause. And just let your arms relax and just take a moment just to check in. How do you feel? A moment of reflection, and then just quietly opening your eyes and taking a little seat. Thank you, Bet, for being so willing. So but you know, we probably did that for a couple of minutes. We've just done a yoga practice. So remember I said, you know, yoga can be practiced by anywhere, anytime. It doesn't have to be in Lululemon tights, and it doesn't actually even have to be on a mat. And it can feel overwhelming, like these 8 limbs, and I've got to think of all of those things, but it's actually really simple. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed that this practice of yoga has given me, and what I've noticed is that why I believe that it is so truly healing and transformational, is because it connects me to myself. It connects me not only to my physical body, but my mental body, my emotional body, and my spiritual body. It gives me the tools to do that, to connect deeply to me. So I no longer have to ask everybody out there, searching out there. Everything that I have and that I deeply need is within me. And there's a quote that I'd like to finish off with and share with you from Mahatma Gandhi that I think sums this up beautifully. There is no need for temples. There is no need for complicated philosophies. My brain, my heart, and my body are my temples. My philosophy is kindness.